Welcome, y'all. It's Wes with DIY Food Plot Pro. Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about how to produce a corn food plot. We are going to dive in and we're going to give you all the details that you need to know to be able to produce a successful corn plot. The very first step in raising a corn food plot is a soil sample. That's going to tell you how much P, K is in the soil, and it's also going to tell you your pH. The second step is applying the fertilizers that you need to be able to raise that crop of corn. So when you look at your soil test, it's going to show you your P, your phosphorus levels, and your K, your potassium levels. Okay, it's not going to show you nitrogen levels because nitrogen is not used in those tests. It is mobile in the soil and it is not going to be on your soil test results. What you need to know about nitrogen, it takes roughly 1 pound of nitrogen per bushel of corn to produce. So what we're looking at for me and my food plots, I would like a goal of about 130 to 150 bushels of corn. That's an awful lot of corn, roughly 56 pounds per bushel. So you can do the math on that, how many bags of corn that would be if you made 150 bushels over 1 acre. The next step is going to be adding lime if your pH is low. Now, this is not a fun thing to do. A lot of people do not like adding lime. I am one of those people. But it is a necessary evil to be able, for your plants to be able to uptake those nutrients that are needed to grow a big, good quality corn crop. You have got to have your pH right. If your pH is 5, 6 or lower, you need to add lime. Whether that be pelleted lime or that be agricultural lime, you're going to have to add lime to bring that pH up. It doesn't have to be 7, but it doesn't need to be 4.8 either, okay? So anywhere between 6 and 7, we are in really good shape as far as our plant is going to be able to uptake all the nutrients that it needs throughout the growing season with minimal impact from a low pH soil. This is a great opportunity to thank all my sponsors. Oh yeah, I don't have any sponsors on this channel. If you want to sponsor me though, hit me up. So the next step in the process is going to be spraying with a pre-plant burn down. You can see this field here, I sprayed this about 2 weeks ago. This is going to be a standing cornfield for me. I sprayed with 32 ounces of glyphosate. I used Dual. I used Elevore, which is really strengthens your burn down and really helps get a lot of control on those kills. And I put an adjunct in to help the Roundup, which is Class Act is the name of it. 16 ounces per acre of Class Act. That mixture should get you a very good clean start, just as like it is right here. 10 days after we sprayed here, and boy, we smoked her hind end, got a good kill. A lot of the tougher weeds are still dying. They will die from what we sprayed, but boy, that looks really good. The next thing that we're going to talk about is your seed corn choices. You want to choose a good quality seed corn that's going to be able to withstand drought. You're not looking for very high top end yielders. We don't need that for these places here. What we're wanting is something that has a lot of drought resistance in case we get into one of those dry summers. We want to be able to make our corn, even with minimal rain. Okay, I'm going to recommend a Roundup Ready corn seed because the reason that I'm going to do that, I use that myself, and I think that is easiest for most food plotters because if you don't use a Roundup Ready seed corn, you are going to have to stay on top of that plot, and if it gets away from you, you're done. Okay, so the management level is much higher, and for a lot of us food plotters, we can't be at those fields at a moment's notice and spraying if we need to, and we're constantly checking those fields. Roundup just makes that a lot easier. If it gets away from you a little bit, Roundup is a really good tool to clean everything back up and fix a lot of the mistakes that we make. So maturity is something else that we want to look at. For us, we're in West Kentucky. I'm looking at 110 to about 120 day corn. Okay, up north in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, they may be looking at 100-day corns. Okay, down south, Alabama, Georgia, some of those places, you may be looking at 130-day plus corn. Okay, you don't want to plant a 130-day corn up in northern Minnesota. Your growing season is probably not that long, and your corn's never going to make it to black layer, which is physiological maturity, and you're going to have a lot of trouble planting that 130-day corn way up north. Likewise, we probably wouldn't want to try to put a 90-day corn down in Alabama or Georgia, because it's going to be so long before the hunting season. Standability is another huge trait that we're looking at when we're choosing a seed corn. You don't want a seed corn that's going to fall over as soon as it gets done. Okay, you want a hybrid that is going to stand there for forever and a day, so that your corn's not going to rot. Once that corn falls over on the ground, it's making contact with the ground at that point, okay? This is all going to rot. When that corn's in the field like this, it doesn't matter how much rain, how much snow you get, that cob is going to continuously take moisture out of it, and it's going to stay there good for a long, long, long time. Let's move on to no-till planting, okay? For our population, I'm looking for 24,000 to 28,000 seeds per acre planted, okay? So what does this mean for most of us? If you have a planter, and most of the time they're going to be on 30-inch rows, okay? So in between the corn plants, when you're planting and you're setting your planter up, you want between 7 and 8 inches of space between those seeds. That's going to get you really close to that 24 to 28,000 seeds per acre. That's not on the super high end like farmers will plant. They might plant 32, 34, 36. We're not trying to make 250 bushel corn. We're not throwing the fertilizer out for 250 bushel corn. We're just trying to make a good quality crop and to be able to feed our whitetails in the fall. We want to plant it about 1.5 inches deep. So if you look, your second knuckle is about where you want to plant, right there. So when you're down there planting and you're setting your planter, you need to be checking, and you want it at about 1.5 inches. I much rather prefer this soil to warm up as it is now. This corn, when I plant this, is going to be out of the ground and growing in 6 to 7 days, no longer than that. If you plant early and the ground is cold, I'm not saying that you're not going to get a stand. You very well could, but it's going to take your corn 10 to 14, maybe even longer than that, to get out of the ground. And what we're looking to do for whitetail plots is, I don't want to be the first to plant, okay? I want to hold off a little while and let some of the farmers around me start planting, those deer to kind of filter out to them. That way I don't have so much pressure on my smaller plots when I start planting, because you're going to have deer, you're going to have turkeys, you're going to have crows, you're going to have squirrels. Everything is going to be coming to that corn when it comes up. That is a very tough thing about corn, is all animals love corn, and deer are really getting to where they like it, especially when it's big. Used to, you really didn't have to worry about deer damage in corn, but they've really started eating corn all the way up from germination all the way till about the pollinating stage. Well, found where the little flockers are eating at. Look at the step up in the corn. That's about 6 foot tall. This is about 3 foot tall. See this? That's 18 rows easy. Stops right there. That's another 24 rows easy. Good grief of living. Look at all the dang deer turds back here. And when you're planting corn with your planter, try not to double anything up. So if you've already planted there, you've already went through there with your planter, don't plant through that again. Corn does not do well with extreme high populations, and more than likely you won't even get an ear there if you try to double up. So some of your inrows, you're gonna have just a little bit of double up that you can't prevent that. Let's talk about broadcasting, because a lot of us don't have planters. We can do it successfully. What we're gonna need to do, we're gonna follow the same steps as we did with the no-till. We're gonna go in and we're gonna spray, we're gonna fertilize, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna work our ground. We're gonna work our ground really well. We're gonna try to get a good seed bed. And the best way to do it is to spread about 20 pounds per acre over that, and spread it light, because I'd rather you spread it out thinner and then have to go over some. is go and have this corn too thick because you ran out. So I always put that on a low setting that I know I'm gonna have to go back and go this way and go this way to get my 20 pounds per acre. The best way to do that is when you broadcast it is to take a disc and disc that in. That's the very best way to do it. You can pretty much be assured your planting depth is going to be pretty close. It's not gonna be as like it is with a planter or a drill, but it's gonna work good enough. And we're putting a little bit more. 20 pounds is more than 28,000, but we're putting that because we know that we're gonna have some on top of the ground, some might not germ up, and so it's not as big a deal, but you just wanna add just a little bit more corn seed to that to make up for some of those that are on top of the ground that are, may not grow. Leads us to some of the sites that we're gonna choose. So you can see this is a little creek bottom field here. It's kind of a rocky ground, it's pretty dry ground. Corn likes well-drained soils. And then here's what I planted today. To about 2.5 acre nook, that's about 200 yards, just to kind of give you a reference on how big this area is right here. Don't plant this in extreme wet conditions. And if you have a place that's not drying up before June 15th, it's probably not a real good choice for a corn food plot. So corn doesn't really do well with wet feet, does a lot better when it's in ground that drains fairly well. We also look at size. Size of the plot definitely matters. It depends on the deer density in your area. Around here, I planted a 3/4 acre plot last year, had a lot of deer damage. I did get through and had corn for the whitetails into the rifle season, but it played out very quickly after that. I had much better results with my 2 acres or more plots. Last year, I did not fence anything in. I am going to this year. I'm gonna fence some in because I've got some tiny plots that I'm planting that are a 1/2 acre, and I'm gonna go ahead and fence them in and try to keep the deer out until right at rifle season. But don't plant corn on a really small spot, especially where there's trees that are shading most of it out. It's not gonna do well in there. So when the corn gets about this tall, we're gonna make our post-emergent herbicide application, which is considered lay-by. That's the last time that we're gonna go in there and spray. What I personally like to spray is my 32 ounces of glyphosate, and then I'm gonna put atrazine and I'm gonna put caprino in there. And those 2 herbicides are going to hold off my weeds and grass until that corn gets big enough that it shades out that 30-inch row, and that's no longer a problem. There are multiple post-emergent herbicide applications for corn. Those are just the ones that I really like. Atrazine can be really tough being sprayed out of the sprayer because it is in granular form. So it really needs to be mixed up well. It's not the easiest to spray. If you don't want to use the atrazine, you can use a product called Anthem Max. The worst part about it is it's very, very expensive and it comes in a big jug. So I really like it. I use it an awful lot on my food plots. I tried it last year, was tickled to death with it. I had better control with it than I did the atrazine mixture, but it is expensive. But I just wanted to go ahead and mention that product to you. Corn is very dependent on rain during pollinating time. When it's pollinating, it's got the silks coming out of the ear. The ear's formed, there's silks coming out, they're white, and then it's got a tassel on the top, okay? Or a tassel, sorry, we call it tassel in Kentucky. It's got a tassel coming out on the top. That is very, very dependent on rain during that 10-day to 2-week window around pollinating. After that, before it doesn't make as big a difference. And after it plays less of a role. But during that 10 to 14 day period, it is extremely important that it gets some rain. We had some last year that basically burned up on us before it got to pollinating. It ended up getting a rain, and it really did fairly decent. Right there at pollinating, it got a little rain, didn't get much. We were in a terrible, terrible drought here last year in 2022, but the corn actually ended up doing pretty solid, considering it wasn't a great crop. We probably made 50 bushel per acre. but we had enough food to feed our whitetails at least partially through the winter. The last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to corn food plots is interseeding. Okay, so your corn is going to be brown, it's going to be done, and what I like personally really like to do is I go in there, and hopefully you don't have to spray much to clean it back up, but if you have to, you go down the rows with a little bit of Roundup and you clean that up a little bit, and then right before rain, go out there and spread you some cereal rye between the rows, because the rows have kind of shrunk. The leaves aren't out like they were. They're kind of in and shrunk now. Sunlight can get down those rows now. You can plant some cereal rye, some buck forage oats, some winter wheat in there, and now all of a sudden you've got a corn crop, which is probably the #1 food source for a whitetail, and now you've added a green plot in the same spot and used the same amount of acres to do so. So that's a awesome choice that I highly recommend. That's something that I've done in the past and has really worked well. The more food that you can put out there for those whitetails, the more variety, the better off you're going to be. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate y'all.